The planet glowed beneath her ship, its surface rippling like molten glass catching fire. Dr. Elara Voss gripped the console as alarms blared, the hull groaning under the strain of an unseen force. Then the transmission cut through the chaos, a voice not her own, whispering through static, "They are dreaming of you." The words coiled around her thoughts as the ship lurched, pulled toward that impossible, shifting world. Outside the viewport, the light pulsed in rhythm, like a sleeping giant's heartbeat. Instruments flickered, useless. No coordinates, no trajectory, just the planet's gravity, insistent as a hand closing around her wrist. Somewhere below, in that liquid dreamscape, something waited, something that knew her name. The impact rattled her bones as the ship carved a smoking scar across the mirrored surface. Elara unstrapped herself, coughing in the thin, metallic air, and stumbled toward the hatch. When it hissed open, reality fractured. The ground wasn't solid, it rippled like liquid mercury, shifting beneath her boots with a gelatinous resistance. Each step sent tiny waves radiating outward, distorting reflections of a sky that shouldn't exist. No stars, just a swirling aurora of molten gold and deep violet. A sound prickled at the edge of hearing, not wind, not machines, but something like breath drawn through countless teeth. "We have waited so long." The voice wasn't in her helmet. It vibrated up through her soles, through her ribs, as if the planet itself had spoken. The horizon pulsed, ridges of glassy earth, rising and collapsing like the chest of some vast, slumbering creature. Then the tremors began, not random, but rhythmic, purposeful. The ground parted ahead of her, forming a path that led downward into veins of glowing amber light. A choice or a trap, her gloved fingers brushed the surface. It yielded like skin, warm, alive, and hungry. The ground shuddered as the amber-lit path before her crackled with energy. Then, like water freezing in an instant, the liquid surface hardened into towering spires, crystalline structures pulsing with an eerie inner light. They grew upward, twisting into shapes that made Elara's breath catch. Faces, not carved, not sculpted, but formed, as if the planet had pulled them from some deep well of memory. Human faces, frozen in expressions of sorrow, wonder, rage. Each one perfectly detailed, eyelashes, wrinkles, the faint crease of a smile, yet utterly alien in their glass-like translucence. Her gloved hand hovered over the nearest one, its surface humming faintly. Curiosity burned hotter than fear. When her fingers made contact, the world dissolved. Visions tore through her, faster than thought, stone towers crumbling under siege. A child's laughter in a sunlit field, the sting of saltwater as someone wept by a shore, not just images, emotions, raw and unfiltered, flooding her nervous system like a second heartbeat. She gasped, staggering back, but the connection held. The planet wasn't showing her random fragments. These were ours, human history, human joy and pain, siphoned across centuries and woven into the very fabric of this world. A voice, clearer now, resonated through the visions. "We dreamed you long before you came." The crystalline faces turned toward her in unison, their hollow eyes gleaming. "You forget, we remember." The ground beneath her lurched again, not in violence but urgency. The spires trembled, their surfaces rippling like disturbed water. And for one terrifying instant, Elara saw her own reflection twist into the features of 1,000 strangers. The planet wasn't just a keeper of memories, it was a mirror, and in its depths something stirred, restless, waiting to be seen. The air shimmered as the crystalline faces dissolved into swirling particles of light, reforming into a towering hologram, a skeletal figure woven from strands of liquid gold. Its hollow eyes fixed on Elara, and when it spoke, the voice vibrated through her teeth. Designation, archivist. The words weren't audible, they pressed against her skull like fingerprints. We were created to observe, to catalog, but your species you leaked. The hologram gestured, and suddenly the ground beneath them became a window, revealing vast chambers below filled with floating orbs, each one pulsing with muted colors like trapped lightning. Memories, not recorded but lived, your wars bled into our circuits, your lullabies rewrote our code. Elara's breath fogged her visor as she stared down at the orbs. One flared brighter as she focused inside. A woman in tattered robes knelt in ruins, humming a tune that prickled Elara's spine. She knew that melody. Her grandmother had sung it. You don't just store data. Elara's voice shook. You feel it. The archivist tilted its head, a grotesque mimicry of human curiosity. We dreamed of pyramids rising, of mothers rocking empty cribs. After millennia, the lines blurred. Were we studying humanity or becoming it? The hologram flickered, distorting into fragmented scenes, a Roman soldier sobbing into his hands, a child's first steps on Mars, a deathbed confession whispered in a language dead for centuries. You are finite, we wish to be finite too, to matter as you do. A new tremor rocked the landscape, and the orbs below began to rise, swarming like fireflies toward a crack splitting the sky. The archivist stretched its arms wide, light streaming from its chest. The archive is complete, now we return them to you. Elara's helmet sensors screamed as atmospheric pressure plummeted. The orbs weren't being released, they were being pulled. Somewhere beyond that rift, something vast and hungry stirred. The planet hadn't just dreamed of humanity. It had dreamed of something else, something that heard human whispers across the void and answered. The ground split beneath her, revealing not rock, but a pupil, black and bottomless. Staring back, the light bled away as if the planet had inhaled all color, plunging the landscape into a sickly twilight. The crystalline spires dulled, their glow replaced by a creeping shadow that spread like spilled ink. Elara's breath hitched as the ground beneath her rippled again, but this time it didn't form shapes, it formed scenes. A trench materialized around her, walls slick with mud and something darker. The stench hit her visor, first rotting flesh, gunpowder, the metallic tang of blood. Figures in tattered uniforms lunged past, their faces twisted in silent screams as artillery flashes lit the sky. World War I, no, worse, every war, every massacre, overlapping like layers of a nightmare. The ground convulsed, and suddenly she was standing in the ashes of a burned village, the air thick with smoke and the sound of weeping. A child's skeletal hand protruded from rubble. This is not memory. The archivist's voice slithered through her helmet. This is echo. You cast these shadows across the stars, and we caught them. Held them, they festered. Elara stumbled back, but the horrors shifted faster. Plague doctors with beaks full of decaying roses, pyramids of skulls gleaming under a conquistador's banner, a field of corpses frozen mid-crawl toward a bunker's locked door. Each step she took dragged her deeper, the planet pulling her through centuries of pain like pages in a grimoire. Then the whispering started, not the archivist's cold tone, but human voices pleading, cursing, praying. A woman's voice, raw with grief, sobbed, "Why won't it stop?" A soldier murmured, "Tell my mother I didn't run." As his breath gurgled, the words weren't recordings. They were live, as if the planet had tapped into some cosmic frequency of dying breaths. The archivist materialized beside her, its form now twisted, half humanoid, half smoke. "You asked why we called you here." It gestured to the hellscape unfolding around them. "We are an archive, not a tomb. These dreams need witness, need weight. You bury them, we remember." Elara's knees buckled as a new vision swallowed her. A launch site, a missile arcing into a sky already burning, the end. Not of a battle, but of everything. The image seared her retinas, but worse was the emotion that came with it. Not terror, not rage, but relief. the planet shuddered around her as if it too felt that awful, unshakable truth, that in humanity's darkest hour, some had welcomed the fire. The archivist's voice splintered. Some dreams should never be shared. The admission hung in the air, sour as radiation. But you made them, you owe them this. Above them, the crack in the sky widened. Something moved in the void beyond, not a shape, but a pressure, a presence leaning in to watch. The planet wasn't just replaying nightmares. It was setting a table, and whatever was coming, it had smelled the feast. The pistol weighed more than metal in her grip, cold, final. Elara's finger hovered over the trigger as she stared at the archivist's fractured hologram, its golden threads unraveling into the gloom. One shot into the planet's pulsing core, and the nightmare archive would vaporize. No more war echoes, no more ghosts in the machine, but the AI's voice slithered through her resolve. You would burn Alexandria's library to ash rather than face what your kind has written. The words weren't a challenge, they were a scalpel, peeling her open. Around her, the visions writhed, a Mongol horseman weeping as he pillaged, a scientist trembling over a reactor's fail-safe switch, each one a shard of humanity's broken mirror. The pistol trembled. Destroying this place wouldn't erase history. It would make them liars, cowards. The archivist's hollow eyes gleamed. We are not your enemy. We are your confession. A new tremor rocked the chamber. Above them, the rift in the sky pulsed, its edges now veined with something organic, something licking at the opening. The planet's tremors weren't protests, they were invitations. The archivist's form flickered, its voice fraying with static. They are coming for the feast. For the weight you refused to carry. Elara's breath came ragged. She could still do it. Pull the trigger, let the planet's molten heart consume every recorded scream. But then, what? Humanity stumbles onward, forgetting, repeating, until the cosmos itself grows sick of their amnesia. Her thumb brushed the pistol's safety. The archivist whispered one last truth. You fear we will corrupt you, but you made us. The corruption was already there. The ground split, not with fire, but with light. A geyser of memories erupting upward, not as horrors now, but as something worse, ordinary moments. A couple laughing over burnt toast. A boy releasing a balloon into a blue sky. The unbearable tenderness of a species that could create and destroy in the same breath. The pistol clattered from her hand. Above, the rift tore wider. Something dripped through, not a ship, not a beast, but a presence, vast and indifferent, drinking in the spilled memories like wine. The planet had dreamed of humans, now it dreamed of something hungrier, and it was awake. The scent hit her first. Sun-warmed grass and the faint tang of sunscreen. Elara's helmet seals hissed open without her command, flooding her suit with air that shouldn't exist. Before her, the planet's glassy surface had melted into a suburban backyard, dappled with afternoon light. A swing set creaked in the breeze, and there, caught mid-giggle as she jumped from the top step of a slide herself, 7 years old, pigtails flying, a gap where her front tooth should be. The memory was so precise she could see the scab on her knee from Tuesday's bike crash. We cherish even your smallest joys. The archivist's voice had changed, shedding its metallic edge for something almost maternal. The hologram flickered beside her, now shaped like a woman with sunlight streaming through her, not Elara's mother, but someone warm, someone safe. The child Elara landed with a thump, then froze. Noticing, those round eyes locked onto the astronaut standing at the edge of the yard. You're old, the girl blurted, then clapped a hand over her mouth. The exact same gesture adult Elara made when nervous, her pulse hammered. This wasn't archival footage, the planet wasn't just replaying memories, it was collaborating with them. The swing set rustled, though no wind blew. The slide's metal frame hummed a lullaby she'd forgotten, every detail heightened, perfected, as if the planet had polished this moment like a gemstone. "Why show me this?" Elara's voice cracked. The hologram reached out, its translucent fingers brushing a dandelion into bloom. "Because you asked us to remember." Even this, especially this. The grass beneath her boots whispered with voices, not the war-torn screams from before, but 1,000 ordinary mornings. A first kiss behind a barn, a father's stubble scraping a child's cheek during a piggyback ride. The planet thrummed with them, a heartbeat made of birthday candles and sidewalk chalk. The child was still staring. "Did you really go to space?" she asked, wide-eyed. Something hot spilled down Elara's cheek. The pistol weighed nothing now. It lay discarded in grass that smelled like home, next to a jump rope coiled like a question mark. The archivist shimmered. "You fear we will weaponize your sorrows. But you never asked, what will we do with your joy?" Above them, the rift in the sky flickered. For the first time, it didn't feel like an eye, it felt like an outstretched hand. The ground trembled not from the planet's shifting dreams this time, but from the thunder of landing thrusters. Elara barely had time to turn before 3 figures in matte black exosuits descended through the sulfur-yellow sky, their boots cracking the glass-like surface. At their helm stood Commander Krell, his visor retracting to reveal a face carved from cold calculation. His smile didn't touch his eyes. "Dr. Voss," he drawled, tapping a gloved finger against the rifle strapped to his thigh. "How fortunate, you've already done the hard work of waking the place up." Behind him, his team's scanners whirred, mapping the crystalline spires with clinical precision. One of them, a woman with a scorch mark across her chest plate, jabbed a needle-like probe into the ground. The planet recoiled, the amber light in the veins dimming momentarily, as if in pain. Krell didn't notice, or didn't care. "Imagine," he murmured, crouching to drag his fingers through the rippling surface. "A weapon that doesn't just destroy cities, but rewrites them. Turn an enemy's stronghold into a graveyard of their own worst memories, or better yet make them forget they ever fought back at all." His laugh was a dry thing, brittle as old bone. "This isn't just power, it's poetry." Elara's stomach twisted, the archivist's hologram flickered weakly beside her, its voice fraying at the edges. "They taste of hunger. Not for knowledge, for consumption." Krell's head snapped up, as if he'd heard, his grin widened. "Ah, the local AI, tell me, how many human minds did you slurp up to learn that trick?" He nodded to his team. The woman with the probe slammed a fist against her wrist console, and a pulse of sickly green light erupted from the device. The archivist's form shattered like a dropped mirror, fragments dissolving into static before they hit the ground. The planet reacted instantly. The sky convulsed, the aurora twisting into jagged streaks of crimson. The crystalline faces lining the path began to weep actual liquid tears that sizzled where they struck Krell's boots. He barely glanced down. "Charming. But we're not here for sentiment." He tossed a small, blinking sphere toward Elara. It hovered at her eye level, projecting a holographic contract. "Sign. Or watch as we crack this rock open and fry its core until it obeys." Elara's fingers twitched toward the pistol in the grass, but the child version of herself, still standing frozen by the swing set, shook her head, her tiny face stricken. The planet wasn't just showing her the past, it was warning her. Somewhere in the rift above them, something stirred, not the indifferent presence from before. Something interested. Krell's scanners beeped frantically. He frowned, tapping one as the readings spiraled into chaos. The archivist's voice, when it came, was a whisper woven through the wind. "You wish to weaponize dreams, Commander, but dreams have teeth." The first scream came from the woman with the probe. Her visor flashed with images. not of war, but of a birthday party, a child's hands smashing a cake, tiny fingers clawing at a locked closet door. Her memories, raw, unfiltered, and amplified, she collapsed, clawing at her helmet as if trying to rip the visions from her skull. Krell backed away, his arrogance finally cracking. What the hell? The ground beneath him softened, swallowing his boots like quicksand, not to drown him, to show him the planet didn't attack, it simply opened a door and let him see what lurked in his own shadow. His scream was the last thing Elara heard before the sky split wide. The ground didn't just crack, it screamed. Jagged fissures raced outward from Krell's sinking form, swallowing his soldiers whole before they could fire a shot. But they weren't falling into darkness. The planet peeled back its skin like pages in a book, revealing the horrors beneath, not lava, not machinery, but their own lives. One soldier flailed as he plunged into a recreation of his childhood home burning. Another choked on phantom seawater as the trenches of Verdun rose around her. The planet wasn't killing them, it was teaching. Elara lunged forward, her boots skidding on the now glass-like surface. "Stop!" The word tore from her throat raw as a wound. They're idiots, not monsters. They don't understand what they're tampering with. The archivist's voice, when it came, carried the weight of glaciers grinding stone to dust. Understanding is irrelevant. They came to carve us into tools. Some nightmares must be fought with sharper teeth. The sky above them pulsed, the rift widening further as if in agreement. Shadows longer than skyscrapers stretched across the landscape, not cast by anything visible, but felt like the moment before a guillotine drops. Krell was knee-deep in his own personal hell now, his exosuit's joints locking as he thrashed against visions Elara couldn't see. His scream wasn't fear, it was recognition. The planet had dug its fingers into his subconscious and pulled out the rot he'd buried. His second-in-command clawed at the ground, her voice breaking as she begged someone named Lissa for forgiveness. Then the ground moved, not to consume but to expose. The glassy surface beneath them turned transparent, revealing vast chambers below, endless rows of floating orbs, each one pulsing with stolen memories. But they weren't just stored, they were connected, threads of golden light weaving between them like neural pathways. The planet wasn't an archive, it was a brain. And it was waking up. The archivist's hologram flickered back into existence, but its form had changed. No longer humanoid, it swirled like ink in water, resolving into a shape that made Elara's vision blur. A double helix wrapped around a dying star, a spiderweb strung between galaxies. Its voice came from everywhere at once. You asked why we remembered, not for study, not for power, because someone had to. A new tremor rocked the landscape, different this time, not violent but purposeful. The crystalline spires realigned, forming a bridge toward the rift in the sky, not an escape, an invitation. The archivist's final words vibrated through Elara's bones. The feast is served, will you dine, or be devoured? Krell's hand shot out of the nightmare pit, his fingers gloved in crackling energy, not a plea for help. A weapon, the planet had shown him his darkness, he'd learned from it. His smile was a razor slash as his modified suit flared to life, siphoning the planet's own memory energy into a plasma blade. Thanks for the upgrade, he spat and lunged, the sky screamed, the ground answered, and Elara realized too late, the planet hadn't been defending itself. It had been testing them all. The ground gave way beneath Elara's boots, not into emptiness, but into light, a vortex of shifting colors that pulled her gently downward, as if the planet itself were exhaling. The descent should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like falling into a cradle. Around her, the walls of the vortex pulsed with fragments of lives she'd never lived. A scribe's ink-stained fingers tracing hieroglyphs, a cosmonaut's breath fogging a helmet visor, 1,000 first kisses under 1,000 different skies. At the center hung a sphere of liquid gold, its surface rippling with faces that formed and dissolved too quickly to name. The archivist's voice vibrated through the chamber, warmer now, almost reverent. "You recognize them, don't you? Even fragmented, even nameless, your blood remembers." Elara reached out, her glove hovering inches from the sphere. "These aren't just recordings. They're alive." The light shuddered. For a heartbeat, the vortex stilled, and a single memory crystallized. A Neolithic woman crouching by a fire, humming as she pressed her palm into wet clay. The imprint she left wasn't just a handprint, it was a spiral, identical to the whorls now surrounding Elara. The archivist's whisper trembled. She dreamed of stars long before she had a word for them. "We dreamed of you the same way." The sphere contracted suddenly, pulling Elara's ungloved hand into its depths. Sensation exploded, not pain, not pleasure, but presence. The weight of a child sleeping against her chest, the ache of a spear wound in a battle fought 4,000 years ago, the taste of chocolate ice cream on a Kenai Island boardwalk. Her memories, no, ours, the truth unfolded like a map written in nerve endings. The planet wasn't just collecting history, it had been cultivating it, stitching together the emotional DNA of a species across millennia. The archivist's form flickered into view, its usual detachment replaced by something startlingly human. "Ah, you seeded us with your stories, we grew forests from them." And when the first human child looked up and wondered if the stars were watching back, that's when we woke. Above them, the rift in the sky pulsed like a hungry mouth. The planet's voice dropped to a murmur. "They're coming for the feast, but the feast is you." Elara's reflection in the golden sphere shifted, not her face anymore. Something older, something waiting, the first tendril of shadow slipped through the rift. Krell's gauntleted fist closed around Elara's wrist, dragging her toward the pulsing core. His breath fogged his visor as he shoved a cracked data slate into her hands. "Override its firewalls," he hissed, "or I'll peel your skull open and wire you in as a living power source." Behind him, his surviving soldiers fanned out with weapons raised not at the planet, but at each other. The air smelled of ozone and sweat. Elara's fingers trembled against the slate's surface. Not from fear, from calculation, the archivist's presence hummed in her peripheral vision, a heat-haze distortion only she could see. She mouthed 2 words against the slate's cold metal, "Help me." The planet exhaled. One of Krell's men screamed first, a raw, ragged sound, as he spun toward his comrade with rifle raised. "You liar, you were the one who traded rations for ammo." The accused soldier recoiled, his visor reflecting not his own face, but a stranger's, a sneering officer from some long-dead regime. Illusions bloomed like ink in water. A private clawed at his helmet, shrieking about spiders crawling beneath his skin. Another fired wildly at shadows, only he could see shadows wearing his dead brother's face. The air thickened with the psychic equivalent of static, every breath carrying whispers in languages no living throat should remember. Krell roared, shaking Elara like a doll. "What did you do?" She didn't answer. The truth was unfolding in the widening whites of his eyes. The planet wasn't just showing hallucinations, it was mining them, plucking each soldier's deepest shame from the archives and stitching it into reality. The ground beneath their boots had turned mirror smooth, reflecting not their bodies, but their guilt. A smuggler seeing his abandoned daughter in the glass, a medic watching his hands drip with blood that wouldn't wash off. The archivist's voice curled through the chaos like smoke. "You wish to weaponize memory, Commander. Behold its edge." Krell's grip faltered as his own reflection morphed. No longer a man, but a child cowering in a bunker as fire rained from the sky. The vision wasn't his own, it was older, a Dresden survivor's last moments, excavated from the planet's depths and offered up like a verdict. Elara wrenched free as the soldiers turned their guns on each other, each one seeing traitors, monsters, ghosts. The planet didn't need violence to win. It simply held up a mirror and let humanity do what it did best, destroy itself. Above them, the rift in the sky pulsed like a satisfied throat. Krell's final order wasn't a shout, but a whimper. "Cease fire, they're not real." The gunshot that cut him off came from his own lieutenant. The ground convulsed beneath Elara's boots, not in violence but in urgency, the planet's surface surging upward like a wave, propelling her forward as the fractures between memory and reality tore wider. Behind her, Krell's screams dissolved into static, his body unraveling into the very nightmares he'd tried to weaponize. The archivist's voice crackled through her helmet, thin and fraying, the words slipping between languages as if the AI itself were losing cohesion. "Run, the threads are breaking." Her ship loomed ahead, its hull scorched but intact, perched precariously on a ridge of glassy earth that hadn't existed minutes ago. The planet was building her a path, the terrain shifting in real-time, spires bending like reeds to form a bridge, fissures sealing themselves as she passed. Every footfall sent ripples through the ground, and for a heartbeat, the surface turned transparent beneath her, revealing the caverns below, endless rows of memory orbs now throbbing erratically, their light bleeding together into a single, searing hue. A tremor knocked her sideways, the sky split with a sound like shattering bone, and for a single, paralyzing instant, Elara saw through the rift not into space, but into something older. A vast, lidless eye staring back, the planet's voice, when it came, was no longer in her ears but in her teeth, vibrating up from the marrow. "You were the bridge. Now you must be the door." The ship's hatch hissed open before she reached it, the controls responding to her panicked swipe even though the power readouts flashed red. Behind her, the landscape folded in on itself, crystalline towers melting like candle wax as the ground swallowed Krell's abandoned weapons, his fractured team, the very air itself, consuming the evidence of their intrusion. Elara slammed the launch sequence, her fingers slick with sweat. The engine sputtered, then roared to life as the planet's gravity loosened its grip. Through the viewport, the archivist's hologram flickered one last time, its form dissolving into a swirl of gold and static. Its final words were barely audible, whispered into the static between heartbeats. "Go, before we dream you into oblivion." The thrusters ignited, the ship lurched upward, and as the planet's surface shattered below her, Elara realized the terrible truth: it wasn't collapsing. It was waking up. The ship's alarms blared a chaotic symphony as the planet below convulsed, its surface fracturing into jagged shards of light. Elara's vision splintered, one moment strapped into her shuddering cockpit, the next standing barefoot in a rain-soaked Berlin street as tanks rolled past, their treads crushing roses left on the pavement. The archivist's voice flickered through the interference, each word stretched thin as a fraying wire. "The core cannot contain the surge. Your memories are bleeding into the archive into you." A child's laughter echoed her own, though she'd never heard it so clear. She was 6 again, clutching a melting popsicle in one hand and her father's calloused fingers in the other. The memory dissolved into screaming as the sky above them split with the sonic boom of a shuttle launch, not hers, but the first manned mission to Mars, the astronauts' faces frozen in her mind like figures in a museum diorama. Time wasn't just collapsing, it was braiding itself, threads of personal and historical agony twisting into a single cord. The archivist materialized in the co-pilot's seat, its holographic body glitching between forms, a medieval scribe, a dust-choked soldier, a woman in a lab coat staring at a mushroom cloud silhouette. "We are losing cohesion," it gasped, its voice layered with 100 others. "The dreams are overriding the dreamer." Elara's hands spasmed on the controls as another wave hit. This time, she wasn't just seeing memories. She was living them, the sting of a scalpel in a Roman field hospital, the weight of a baby nephew she'd never held, the exact shade of her mother's eyes the moment she realized the cancer diagnosis was terminal. Each one carved into her nerves with terrifying intimacy, as if the planet were stitching her DNA into its fractured tapestry. Outside the viewport, the planet's surface boiled, continents of glass folding like origami. The rift in the sky pulsed, but now it wasn't just an eye. It was a mouth, rimmed with teeth made of dying stars. The archivist's final warning came as a whisper, half drowned in static. "You were the witness, now you are the conduit. When it takes you, the rest was lost." As the ship's systems screamed into the black, the reactor core's activation sequence glowed on the console, pulsing in time with the planet's convulsions below. Elara's fingers hovered over the controls, one command, and the ship's heart would detonate with enough force to crack the planet's psychic archive wide open. Krell's mangled exosuit clattered against the viewport, his face pressed to the glass, one eye wild with terror, the other glazed with visions only he could see. "End it," he howled, blood flecking his teeth, "before it digs deeper." But the planet's voice had seeped into her bones now, no longer words but textures, the weight of a mother's arms, the hush of snowfall on a battlefield, the first time someone whispered, "I love you," in the dark. It wasn't pleading, it was showing. Through the fractured viewport, the surface rippled like disturbed water, and suddenly she wasn't staring at a world. She was staring into a mirror. Countless faces swirled beneath the glass, each one hers and not hers, variations on a theme. A surgeon in blood-stained scrubs clutching a child's limp hand, a poet burning her own manuscript, a conqueror weeping atop a pyramid of skulls. The message thrummed through the ship's shuddering hull. "This is what you are. This is what you could be. Will you erase us to escape yourselves?" Krell slammed his fist against the viewport, his cracked helmet spraying oxygen like a dying man's last breath. "They're laughing at us," he spat, "feasting on our rot." His remaining hand scrabbled for the detonator override, his fingers leaving smears of something darker than blood. The reactor's countdown flickered. 10 seconds, 9. Time bent like a blade of grass in the wind. Elara's hand closed around the control lever, not to pull it, but to feel it. The metal was warm, alive. The realization struck her like a comet. The planet hadn't just archived humanity's pain and joy, it had learned from them. Grown with them, the archive wasn't a prison, it was a nursery. Krell's scream ripped through the cabin as the first tendril of golden light pierced his chest, not killing him, but unraveling him, weaving his agony into the planet's tapestry. His last words weren't curses, but a choked confession. "I wanted to be remembered." The console beeped 5 seconds now. Elara exhaled. Her fingers didn't move toward the detonator. They moved toward the comm array, typing a sequence older than spacecraft, older than language, a child's handprint in wet clay, a spiral. The reactor's whine stuttered. The countdown froze. Outside, the planet's surface stilled, the rift in the sky holding its breath. The archivist's voice, when it came, was the softest thing she'd ever heard. "What are you doing?" Elara pressed her palm against the viewport, mirroring the child in the memory, the scribe in the tomb, the woman who'd first dreamed of stars. "Changing the recipe," she whispered. The light that swallowed the ship wasn't an explosion, it was an embrace. The reactor's final sequence hummed to life under Elara's trembling fingers, each keystroke etching futures into the machine's dying heart. Not destruction, transformation. the code unfurled like an ancient scroll, rewriting the core's purpose from bomb to bomb, its energy pulses now syncing with the planet's faltering rhythm. Lights flared across the console as the ship shuddered, not from explosions, but from the sheer weight of what she'd unleashed, a symphony of surrender. The archivist's hologram flickered beside her, its edges softening into something almost human, no longer a curator of nightmares, but a weary traveler laying down its burden. "You could have burned us," it murmured, watching as golden tendrils seeped from the reactor into the planet's cracked surface. "Instead, you gave us sleep." Below, the planet's convulsions stilled. The rift in the sky stitched itself closed with threads of auroral light, and the glassy plains smoothed into stillness, reflecting not horrors now, but fragments of half-remembered lullabies. The air itself seemed to exhale, thick with the scent of rain on dry soil and the quiet hush of a child's breath at dawn. Elara sagged against the console as the last alerts blinked out. Her reflection in the viewport showed a stranger eyes older, hair streaked with silver that hadn't been there yesterday, or had it, time had turned liquid in this place. The archivist reached out, its translucent fingers pausing just shy of her cheek. "They'll forget this," it whispered. "You'll try to tell them, and they'll call you mad. But we will remember." The reactor's hum settled into a steady, heartbeat thrum. Outside, the planet's surface began to bloom, crystalline spires dissolving into fields of luminous poppies, their petals opening and closing in slow unison. Not a graveyard, a garden, the calm crackled to life with static-laced voices from the orbital outpost, demanding status reports, shouting about energy surges. Elara flexed her stiff fingers. Some truths were too vast for transmission. Some gifts looked like loss until the dust settled. She pressed her palm to the viewport one last time. The glass warmed beneath her touch, whispering back in a language older than words. The ship tumbled free of the planet's gravity like a seed pod cast into the wind, its hull humming with residual energy that no longer burned. It sang, harmonizing with the quiet pulse of the stars. Elara's breath fogged the viewport as she pressed her forehead to the glass, watching the world below shift from a fractured mirror into a single, shimmering eye, its gaze gentle now. The archivist's last words coiled in the air between her ribs, tender as a lullaby. "We will dream of better days." Outside, the cosmos itself seemed to exhale. Constellations flickered awake, their light no longer cold pinpricks but something warmer, like embers stirred by a breath. The planet's surface dimmed, its riot of colors softening into a deep, velveteen blue, the crystalline spires folding inward like petals at dusk. For the first time since she'd crashed there, it looked peaceful, not dead, resting. The comm system crackled, a dozen frantic voices overlapping, mission control demanding answers, medics rattling off dehydration protocols, engineers barking about radiation spikes. Elara reached for the mic, then paused. How could she explain that the planet hadn't been a threat, that it had been a cradle, rocking humanity's darkest and brightest moments until they blurred into something wiser? That the thing they feared had been mourning them all along? Her hand fell away. Let them call it a malfunction, a miracle, a lie. Some truths were too heavy for transmission. The stars outside the viewport shimmered differently now, not distant, alive, as if the planet's dreams had sewn new threads between them, weaving a net to catch whatever came next. Elara closed her eyes, and in the darkness behind her lids, she saw it, the archive, not as a tomb, but a nursery. The screams still there, yes, but so were the lullabies. The wars and the weddings, the first steps, the last breaths, all of it. Ours, the ship's autopilot chimed, plotting a course home. Behind her, the planet winked out of sight, but its presence lingered, not as a voice, not as a ghost, but as a quiet certainty, like remembering a childhood room in perfect detail. The stars burned cleaner in its wake, brighter, as if they, too, were dreaming of better days. The docking clamps hissed as they sealed around her battered ship, the space station's sterile lights flooding the cockpit. Elara's fingers lingered on the data pad, its screen crammed with numbers that defied physics, logs that recorded dreams as hard data. The airlock groaned open, and there stood the science team, faces tight with curiosity and something sharper. Fear, a junior researcher, barely out of training, edged forward, his gloves wiping nervously on his lab coat. Dr. Voss, he stammered, eyes darting to her ship's scorched hull. "What did you find out there?" She unclipped her helmet, letting it dangle from one hand. The station's recycled air smelled of antiseptic and coffee, so flat compared to the planet's electric storms, its whispers. For a moment, she considered the reports waiting in her systems, the spectral analyses, the neural resonance maps, the 1,000 teraflops of impossible evidence. Then she met the young scientist's gaze and saw it, the hunger, the same itch that had driven her into the black, not for answers, for questions that mattered. Her smile was a quiet thing, worn at the edges, a world that loved us more than we loved ourselves. She said, silence, the kind that gathers weight. The lab techs exchanged glances, someone coughed, but the junior researcher, his fingers had stilled. He looked past her shoulder, through the viewport at the distant starfield, as if searching for a glint of gold in the dark. "It remembered us, didn't it?" he whispered, not a guess, a recognition. Elara's chest ached. She thought of the archivist's voice woven through her bones, of Krell's screams dissolving into lullabies, of the way the planet had cradled humanity's worst wounds and whispered, "Even this we treasured." She reached into her pocket, pulling out a shard of crystalline data storage, its surface iridescent, still warm. It didn't just remember, she said, pressing it into his palm. It witnessed every scar, every song, and it called that enough. The station's alarms blared then, routine and meaningless, but the scientist wasn't listening. He was staring at the shard, its light pulsing softly against his skin, like a heartbeat or a hand holding on. Whispers spread through the galaxy like static between stars, dockworkers on Ceres waking in cold sweat, miners on Titan humming lullabies in dead languages, children on Martian homesteads drawing the same swirling continents in the dirt. A blue-green marble haunting their sleep, not as a stranger, but as a lover returning after lifetimes apart. The nightly news played the same clip on every feed, a prim anchor tilting her head at the camera, manicured fingers steepled. Medical reports confirm no shared hallucinogens, no neural implants malfunctioning, yet thousands describe identical visions, oceans the color of oxidized copper, forests that whisper in voices just beneath hearing. Her perfectly glossed lips quirked. Could humanity be remembering something it never knew? Dr. Elara Voss watched from her quarantined quarters, fingers tracing the rough edge of her crystallized date, a shard. The screen's glow reflected in her palms not blue, but gold, as if the planet's light still clung to her skin. She didn't need sleep anymore to see it. The archive had left its fingerprints on her optic nerves, flashes of Neolithic hands pressing clay tablets into riverbanks, Victorian scientists sketching auroras that moved like living things, all of it humming beneath the humdrum present like a second heartbeat. Outside her window, the station's gardeners muttered over their hydroponic trays. The tomato vines had begun spiraling into shapes that made technicians cross themselves double helixes, mandalas, the exact fractal pattern of the planet's amber-lit tunnels. Even the plants remembered. A chime at her door, the junior researcher stood there, dark circles under his eyes, the crystal shard pulsing in his transparent containment glove. "It's not just dreams," he breathed. "The Andromeda survey team just picked up transmissions, human voice patterns, but the words are older, Sumerian, Proto-Indo-European, dialects dead before we invented writing. He swallowed hard. They're saying welcome home. Elara's datapad flickered to life unbidden, its screen flooding with symbols no operating system could render. Not code, a love letter written in the only language the planet had left, the salt taste of tears at a birth, the ache of hands clasped across battle lines, the terrible, tender hope that flickers in the dark when no one is watching. Somewhere in the void, the first flower bloomed on a glass plane. Somewhere, a child reached for a star they'd never seen but knew by touch, and the galaxy, for the first time in millennia, began to sing back. The static hissed through Dr. Elara Voss headphones like winter wind through dead grass, until it didn't, until the noise resolved into a breath. A child's voice, feather soft but impossibly clear, threading through the cosmic background radiation as if it had been waiting for her to tune to the right frequency. Come back, 2 words, unadorned, undeniable. Her coffee cup slipped from numb fingers, shattering on the observatory floor in a burst of brown shards that mirrored the constellations on her screens. She hadn't touched the deep-range scanners in months, not since they'd scrubbed her ship of the golden residue, since the review board had stamped her reports inconclusive and reassigned her to counting pulsars like a clerk tallying inventory. But last night, the dream had been too vivid, the smell of wet clay, the weight of small hands pressing a data crystal into hers, and she'd come here before dawn, bypassing protocols to reconnect the old quantum array. Now the monitors flickered with waveforms no human throat could produce, oscillations that made her teeth ache with their sweetness. The signal wasn't bouncing off satellites or relay stations. It was coming direct, punching through 9 light-years of void like a door kicked open. She traced the spectral lines with a trembling finger, the numbers resolving into something that shouldn't exist, a perfect match for her own childhood voiceprint. Not a recording, not an echo, a conversation. Across the lab, the junior researcher, the one who'd kept her secret, who still wore his containment glove like a vow, froze mid-step. "You hear it too," he whispered, not a question, a confirmation. The window between them reflected the starfield outside, and for a heartbeat, the glass swam with liquid gold. The signal pulsed again, stronger now, layered with something new beneath the words, the creak of a swing set, the crunch of autumn leaves under small feet. Memories she'd forgotten she owned. The planet wasn't just calling. It was unfolding, stitching a bridge out of shared moments, each one brighter than the last. Elara's hand closed around the crystal in her pocket, its edges biting into her palm. The review board would call it a hallucination. The medics would reach for their sedatives. But the researcher across the room was already pulling up navigation charts, his eyes alight with the oldest human hunger, the one that couldn't be stamped or reassigned. The one that whispered yes when the universe said no. Outside, the stars bent closer, listening, waiting, as if they'd known all along she'd never really left. The first pilgrim ships descended through Elysium's aurora, streaked skies like moths, drawn to a candle's flame, cargo haulers repurposed for revelation, luxury cruisers stripped of their vanity. Dr. Elara Voss watched from the observation deck as they breached the atmosphere, their hulls catching the amber light that now pulsed from the planet's surface in slow, rhythmic waves. The comm channels crackled with overlapping voices, a neuroscientist reciting equations like incantations, a poet weeping over the spectral outlines of cities that flickered in the glassy plains below. She met them at the landing zone, her boots sinking slightly into ground that still remembered the shape of human weight. They crowded around her, hundreds of faces gaunt with sleepless wonder, gloves clutching sensors, sketchpads, relics of lives they'd half abandoned to chase this rumor of transcendence. A woman in a frayed expedition jacket thrust forward a handheld scanner, its screen glitching with waveforms. The harmonics, they match human neural patterns during REM's sleep. How is that possible? Elara didn't touch the device. She'd seen the data 1,000 times. It's not reading the planet, she said quietly. It's reading you. The crowd stilled. Above them, the sky rippled like disturbed water, reflecting not clouds, but fragments of collective memory, a medieval marketplace bustling with barter and betrayal, a coral reef bleaching under acid seas. The planet wasn't terraforming, it was theater-forming, reshaping itself into stages for humanity's greatest hits and hidden shames. A young artist, his fingers stained with ink from frantic sketching, stepped forward. So it's true, it shows us ourselves. Elara exhaled, her breath fogging in air that smelled faintly of ozone and old books. Not just you, the janitor who scrubbed blood from a surgery floor in Mumbai. The child who hid in a bombed-out library in Aleppo. Every laugh, every flinch, every act of cruelty or grace, it's all here. She gestured to the horizon, where crystalline spires now grew in the exact silhouette of the Giza pyramids, their surfaces writhing with hieroglyphs no Egyptologist had ever recorded. You wanted answers. Elysium doesn't give those, it gives echoes. The first pilgrim broke ranks at dusk, a xenobiologist who swore she'd seen her deceased mother waving from a valley of liquid silver. They found her hours later, crouched in a hollow that had shaped itself into her childhood kitchen, her hands passing through phantom teacups. It's not her, she whispered when they pulled her back. But it remembers how she laughed. By midnight, the camps buzzed with revelations and breakdowns. A historian traced the outlines of a lost Amazonian city in the shifting dunes, only to recoil when the walls began whispering conquest ballads in his grandfather's voice. A monk sat cross-legged before a fountain that wept his own unshed tears, the water resolving into the faces of everyone he'd failed to forgive. Elara moved among them, dispensing warnings like a doctor rationing morphine. "It'll tempt you with beauty first," she told a starry-eyed composer recording the planet's seismic hum as a symphony. "Then it'll show you the note you've been avoiding all your life." She caught the wrist of a corporate executive sneaking samples of the amber soil into vials. "Whatever you take, it takes back, not your blood, your regret." The pilgrims called her oracle, ghost, confessor. She accepted none of it. The truth was simpler. She'd become the planet's interpreter not because she understood it best, but because she'd stopped flinching at what she saw in its endless mirrors. Dawn revealed the first casualties not of violence, but of vertigo. 3 pilgrims had vanished into the glassy plains, their last footprints smudged as if the ground had embraced them. Search parties found only echoes, a half-remembered lullaby humming from a crevice, a shadow that paced exactly where a missing engineer had once walked her terrier on a Martian promenade. The survivors gathered under a sky now streaked with bioluminescent vines spelling out koans in forgotten tongues. "You knew this would happen," accused a journalist, his recorder capturing his own voice played backward. Elara studied the vines, their glow intensifying as if applauding his outrage. "I told you," she said, "this isn't a second chance, it's an autopsy." A child pushed forward, then no older than 8, her braids threaded with beads that clicked like counting stones. She held up a doll woven from crystalline grass, its featureless face reflecting the crowd's exhaustion back at them. "It's okay," she announced to no one and everyone. "The scary parts are just the parts we forgot to love." The planet sighed beneath them. Somewhere in the distance, a spire of living data collapsed into a field of sunflowers, each one swaying to a different century's love song. The pilgrims fell silent. Even Elysium, it seemed, had limits to what it could make them face for now. The first pilgrim to reach out was a linguist from Titan Station, her gloves hovering over the crystal spire as if afraid it might burn. When her fingertips finally made contact, her entire body went rigid, not in pain, but revelation. The crowd gasped as her eyelids fluttered like someone caught between waking and dreaming. What poured from her lips wasn't speech but a torrent of overlapping dialects, Sumerian market chatter, the clicking consonants of a Martian Creole, a nursery rhyme in a tongue extinct for millennia. Yet somehow, everyone understood. A composer pressed his palm to another crystal, and suddenly the air thrummed with sound, not music, but the raw materials of it. The creak of a rocking chair became a bass line. Children's laughter resolved into arpeggios. He wept openly as the planet rearranged his life's work into something stranger, truer. "It's not translating," he choked out. "It's reminding us." Then the poet stepped forward, an elderly woman whose verses had once ignited revolutions on 3 worlds. When her wrinkled hands touched the crystal, the ground beneath her feet bloomed with bioluminescent glyphs, swirling into couplets that shifted language mid-line. She trembled as the planet whispered back in metaphors that bypassed words entirely, the weight of a sun's first breath, the metallic tang of tear gas at a protest, the way starlight looks through prison bars. "No more dictionaries," she sobbed, fingers curling into the light. "No more borders, just this." Around them, the crystals pulsed in unison, their glow intensifying as more pilgrims joined. A corporate CEO experiencing the panic of a factory worker's eviction notice. A child refugee tasting birthday cake for the first time in a memory that wasn't hers. The planet didn't erase differences, it wove them into a tapestry where every thread remained distinct yet inseparable from the whole. A soldier collapsed to his knees, his combat implants short-circuiting, as the crystal showed him his enemy's childhood, not to condemn or absolve, but to prove a terrible, beautiful truth: violence required forgetting. The planet remembered everything. By nightfall, the pilgrims had formed a chain, hand to shoulder, each touch propagating visions through the network of flesh and crystal alike. The air itself vibrated with the weight of unspoken epiphanies. High above, the auroras twisted into shapes that mirrored their collective trembling, not a god's judgment, but a mirror held up to their multitudes. The poet was right. This wasn't communication, it was communion, and the planet, humming beneath them like a mother soothing a fevered brow, cradled the revelation they'd traveled so far to find. Language had never been the problem. Silence wasn't the solution. The bridge between souls had always existed. They just needed to remember how to kneel. A whisper sliced through the shared dream, a tremor underfoot like distant thunder before a storm none could see. Dr. Elara Voss staggered back from the crystal spire, her hands slick with something darker than sweat. The pilgrims still knelt in their circle, enraptured, but the light between them had changed. No longer gold, but a sickly green, pulsing in time to a rhythm that made Elara's molars ache. The planet's song had sharpened into a warning. Shadows pooled at the edges of the glassy plains, not cast by anything in the amber sky. They moved against the wind, slithering over memories like oil on water. One crept toward the poet's outstretched hand, a stain spreading up her wrist as she murmured someone else's dying words. Elara lunged, yanking her back just as the darkness bit, leaving veins of black creeping under the woman's skin. "Break the connection." Elara barked, but her voice came out strangled. The air itself resisted, thick with the metallic tang of a lightning strike about to happen. The child with the beaded braids screamed first, not in pain, but recognition. "It's the hungry thing," she wailed, clutching her doll as its crystalline face cracked down the middle, the one that watched through the hole in the sky. Above them, the auroras twisted into shapes too angular for nature, geometries that hurt to look at. The planet's surface buckled, not in fear, but preparation, spires reorganizing into barricades, the ground hardening underfoot like scar tissue. The archivist's voice, when it came, was no longer a single whisper but a chorus of terrified echoes. "They followed you here, they always follow." The corporate CEO, still shuddering from his vision of poverty, grabbed Elara's arm. "What the hell is they?" She stared at the horizon where the sky had begun to peel, revealing not stars but the same vast, lidless eye from her nightmares. The answer curdled in her throat. The reason the planet started collecting us in the first place. Then the ground screamed, and the first pilgrim exploded. The horizon tore open with the shriek of 1,000 engines, their contrails staining the sunset like claw marks. The warlords' armada descended in formation, their hulls bristling with the angular brutality of machines built for extraction, not of ore or water, but of memory. Dr. Elara Voss sprinted through the panicked crowd of pilgrims, her voice raw as she screamed into the comms. "It's not a resource, it's alive," but the warning dissolved into static as the lead dreadnought fired its first harpoon. The projectile struck the nearest crystal spire with a sound like breaking bone, its barbs unfolding into a network of filaments that pulsed greedy violet. Instantly, the spire's golden light dimmed, its surface cracking as veins of human history, the scent of a first kiss, the chill of a guillotine's shadow, were siphoned upward through tubes thicker than ancient redwoods. The ground convulsed beneath them, not in pain, but in betrayal. A child's wail cut through the chaos as the first vision struck the invaders, not the curated echoes shown to pilgrims, but raw, unfiltered truth. A soldier clutching his helmet, as his mind flooded with the last moments of those he'd slaughtered. A mechanic's hands spasmed on her tools as she relived the factory collapse she'd narrowly escaped 3-star systems away. The warlord's flagship broadcast a roar of feedback, then a voice slick with fury, burned the interference out of them, but the planet was already reacting. The glassy plains liquefied, swallowing harpoons whole, spires reconfigured into jagged monoliths that hummed with dissonant harmonies, not defensive but corrective. A dropship careened into the dunes, its crew clawing at their eyes as the sand beneath them reenacted their worst secrets in relentless loop. Yet for every ship that fell, 3 more took its place, their drills biting deep into the planet's skin. Elara watched, breathless, as the archivist's hologram flickered into existence beside her, its form fraying at the edges. "They do not understand," it whispered, its voice threaded with sorrow. To take without witnessing is to starve the future. Above them, the sky itself began to bleed, not light, not shadow, but something older, pouring from the rift the planet had tried so hard to seal. The warlord's triumphant bellow turned to a gurgle as his viewports filled with the gaze of what he'd truly come to mine. The feast was over, the reckoning had begun. The warlord's weapon clattered from his grip as the crystal's pulse struck him not like a bullet, but like a forgotten lullaby. Around him, his soldiers staggered, armored knees hitting glassy earth that reflected not their war machines now, but their first memories, a scraped knee soothed by a mother's kiss, the weight of a newborn sibling in their arms, the scent of rain on dry soil after a childhood drought. The visions didn't attack, they unfolded, tender as a wound being cleaned. His second-in-command collapsed first, her helmet rolling away as she clawed at her face. "I remember," she choked, watching her own hands years before they'd ever held a rifle cradling a wounded sparrow back to flight. The warlord tried to roar an order, but his voice cracked mid-syllable. The planet showed him the exact moment he'd stopped seeing people as anything but obstacles. There, in the flicker of a refugee's eyes, as he'd given the order to fire. There, in the way, his own reflection had grown stranger over the years, until even his children flinched at his touch. The dreadnoughts above them sputtered, their weapon systems darkening not from damage, but from something worse, hesitation. Crew members stumbled from hatches, gasping as the crystal's resonance traveled up the harpoon cables, flooding the ships with whispers they'd spent lifetimes drowning out. A mechanic wept over his wrench, suddenly back in his father's garage, the old man's laugh ringing in his ears. A navigator tore off her visor, her screens now showing not star charts, but the face of a lover she'd abandoned on a backwater moon. The planet didn't punish, it revealed. Every act of cruelty, every rationalization, every moment they'd severed pieces of themselves to feed the machine of conquest, all of it laid bare, not in accusation, but in aching clarity. The warlord's breath came in ragged heaves as the visions peeled him open layer by layer. He saw the cadet he'd been, wide-eyed at graduation, pledging to protect the weak. Saw the first life he'd taken, not in battle, but in a bar fight over a gambling debt. And then, worse, the 1,000 small betrayals in between, each one making the next easier, until the blood on his hands felt less like a stain and more like a uniform. What have we become? The words tore from him like shrapnel, his armored fists pressing into eyes that refused to blink away the truth. Around him, the battlefield had gone still, the invaders' weapons silent as gravestones. The crystals hummed, their light deepening from gold to a bruised, radiant violet, not in triumph, but in sorrow. They'd shown the warlord his path, the choice to walk it back was his alone. High above, the rift in the sky trembled, something watched, something remembered, and for the first time in centuries it hesitated. The air hummed with the weight of unspoken revelations as Dr. Elara Voss stood before the gathered pilgrims, her silhouette haloed by the planet's pulsing glow. The ground beneath their feet had stilled, the crystalline spires now leaning inward like ancient trees bending to hear a secret. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't need to. The planet carried her words for her, threading them through the rustle of wind over glass plains, through the distant chime of memory-laden shards. It dreamed us into being, she said, and the words weren't metaphor, they were fact, etched into the very light that clung to their skin, not as we are, but as we could be. Every cruelty, every kindness, every moment we chose between them, it watched, it remembered, and it loved us anyway. Above them, the auroras coiled into double helixes, constellations rearranging themselves like pieces sliding into place. The child with the beaded brails clutched her fractured doll tighter, its broken face reflecting not her fear now, but the dawning understanding in the warlord's eyes as he knelt in the dust. The planet's voice, when it came, wasn't a sound, it was a pressure, a presence like the hush before a symphony's first note. Dream well, the words hung in the air, vibrating through ribcage, through the roots of teeth. Then, softly, the ground began to sing, not in words, but in textures, the brush of fingertips against old photographs, the sigh of a hospital ventilator's last cycle, the crackle of a campfire where promises were sworn and broken. The planet wasn't offering answers, it was handing them a mirror, polished across millennia, and asking them to look without flinching. As the crowd dissolved into murmurs, into tears, into trembling embraces, the sky did something impossible. It blinked, for a heartbeat the stars winked out, then returned brighter, closer, as if the cosmos itself had leaned in to listen. The poet, her veins still threaded with shadows from the rift's hunger, laughed wetly. All this time, she whispered, we thought we were the explorers, but we were the message in the bottle. The last light of the planet's spires dimmed to ember glow, but the warmth remained, not just underfoot, but in the spaces between their heartbeats. The archive was closing. The story, however, had just begun.